At 11:47 a.m. on January 11, 1944, Major James Howell Howard scanned the pale winter sky over central Germany and immediately understood the danger. More than 30 German fighters were rolling into attack positions, black specks tilting into sunlight as they dived toward three tight formations of B-17 flying fortresses below him. The bombers were strung out in disciplined boxes, silver against the cold blue air, each aircraft heavy with fuel, men, and damage already taken on the long flight in. Howard was alone. Moments earlier, his P-51 Mustang squadron had been scattered in a brief but violent dogfight near the target area. When he climbed back to bomber altitude, there were no friendly fighters in sight. No wingmen, no top cover, no relief coming. Just one Mustang between 300 American airmen and the full weight of the Luftwaffe. Howard was 30 years old, but his war experience already spanned half the globe. He had flown 70 combat missions, 56 in Burma and China with the Flying Tigers, where he had destroyed 6 Japanese aircraft, and 14 more over Europe after taking command of the 356th Fighter Squadron. Now he flew the new long-range P-51B Mustang, an aircraft capable of escorting bombers deep into Germany, if it survived long enough. Below him, 10 B-17s of the 401st Bomb Group held formation. Each carried 10 men. Each depended on overlapping machine gun fire and escort fighters to survive the journey home. Their P-47 Thunderbolt escorts had already turned back earlier due to fuel limits. Howard was all that remained. The German fighters closing in were Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf Fw-190s, some of the most lethal interceptors the Luftwaffe possessed. Their pilots were experienced, operating from bases less than 50 miles away. They carried full fuel loads, full ammunition, and the advantage of numbers. The bombers had none of those things. Howard checked his instruments. His Mustang carried 4 .50 caliber Browning machine guns, 2 in each wing, with 1,700 rounds total. At a disciplined combat rate of fire, he had roughly 4 minutes of shooting, if he was careful. His fuel gauge showed perhaps 30 minutes remaining. After that, the Merlin engine would go silent. The first wave of German fighters rolled in. Howard shoved the throttle into emergency war power and dove. The Mustang surged past 400 miles per hour, compressing the airframe as he dropped toward the bombers. A Bf-109 was lining up behind a B-17 nicknamed Patches. Howard centered the gun sight on the cockpit and fired a short burst. The canopy shattered. The German fighter snapped inverted and fell away trailing smoke. Howard pulled up into a brutal 6G turn, his vision narrowing at the edges. 2 more Messerschmitts were already repositioning. He reversed, cut inside their turn radius, and fired again. Flames burst from one engine cowling. The pilot bailed out immediately. More fighters appeared. Fw-190s, yellow-nosed aircraft from elite units. They recognized the situation at once. One American fighter. No wingmen. They began coordinating. Some fighters engaged Howard directly. Others lined up on the bombers. It was textbook doctrine against an isolated escort. Howard had seconds to choose: fight defensively and save himself, or stay with the bombers and accept attacks from every direction with no one watching his tail. He chose the bombers. An Fw-190 dove from high 12 o'clock toward the lead formation. Howard cut across its path and fired. The wing root exploded. The aircraft disintegrated in midair. His ammunition counter was dropping fast. In less than 4 minutes, he had fired more than 500 rounds. The attacks did not stop. Howard dove, climbed, reversed, rolled, using the Mustang's speed and acceleration to cut between German fighters and bomber formations. He was not chasing kills. He was breaking attack runs, disrupting timing, forcing hesitation. Then something changed. Howard squeezed the trigger, and only one gun fired. He checked the switches, reset them, tried again. Nothing changed. 3 of his 4 machine guns had jammed. Only the left inboard Browning was still cycling. At 24,000 feet, temperatures dropped below -40. Metal contracted. Springs weakened. Ammunition belts misaligned. It was a known problem, usually survivable. Not today. 6 German fighters were reforming for another attack. Howard now had 1 gun, roughly 350 rounds, and perhaps 90 seconds of fire if he was disciplined. The Luftwaffe pilots didn't know that. As long as Howard stayed aggressive, kept diving, climbing, positioning, he remained a threat they had to respect. And respect was the only thing keeping the bombers alive. The German pilots began to adapt. They had seen American escorts before, aggressive, disciplined, dangerous, but never alone. As the fight stretched on, patterns emerged. The Mustang was still fast, still bold, still perfectly positioned, but its gunfire was becoming selective. Howard felt it too. His ammunition counter dropped steadily, far faster than his fuel gauge. He had already burned through most of his remaining rounds, firing only when positioning demanded it, never spraying, never wasting a burst. The left inboard gun vibrated with every short squeeze of the trigger. It was all he had left. Below him, the bombers pressed on, engines droning, formation tight. Inside their aluminum skins, gunners stared through frosted plexiglass at a sky filled with enemy aircraft. They watched the same impossible sight again and again. A single P-51 Mustang diving, climbing, cutting across attack paths, forcing German fighters to break off at the last second. Some counted 30 enemy fighters. Others swore it was closer to 40. The exact number didn't matter. What mattered was that the Mustang stayed. Howard had now been fighting for more than 15 minutes. He checked his gauges. Fuel was sliding into the yellow. Ammunition in the remaining gun, barely 200 rounds. Less than 5 seconds of fire. The Luftwaffe pilots began testing him. Two Bf-109 slid in behind Howard, not attacking the bombers, but shadowing him, forcing defensive maneuvers. If they could pin the Mustang, the rest of the formation would have a clear shot at the B-17s. Howard reversed violently. The Messerschmitts overshot. He rolled, pulled through, and fired a 1-second burst at the lead fighter. The German broke away instantly. Howard didn't know if he'd hit him. It didn't matter. The attack was disrupted. But the cost was high. Another 20 rounds gone. Moments later, an FW-190 made a fast beam attack on the rearmost bomber. Howard turned hard into it, pulling nearly 7 gs. His vision narrowed to a gray tunnel. He waited until 400 yards and fired a short burst. The canopy shattered. The Focke-Wulf peeled away, trailing damage. That was a solid hit. It also left Howard with less than 200 rounds total. Then the worst happened. Howard squeezed the trigger again. Nothing. No recoil. No tracers. No sound. The last gun had jammed. He flipped switches. Checked the panel. Tried again. Still nothing. The ammunition counter still showed rounds remaining, but the weapon would not cycle. Whether the belt had twisted, the mechanism had frozen, or the barrel had seized, the result was the same. James Howard was now flying a fighter with no working guns. 30 German fighters circled above and below. The bombers were still deep inside Germany. His fuel gauge slid closer to empty. And yet, nothing changed in the sky. When Howard turned aggressively toward an approaching fighter, the German broke away. When he dove at an attacker lining up on a bomber, the attack dissolved. Time and again, the Luftwaffe pilots reacted exactly as they always had. They still believed he could shoot. Howard understood immediately. His last weapon was bluff. The German pilots could not see inside his cockpit. They could not see jammed guns or silent triggers. All they knew was that for the past 20 minutes, this Mustang had been lethal. As long as Howard acted like a threat, they had to assume he was one. So he stayed aggressive. Every time a fighter lined up on the bombers, Howard turned directly toward it, closing fast, threatening collision, forcing split-second decisions. And every time, the German pilot broke away. No shots fired. Just nerve. But bluffing burned fuel faster than bullets ever had. Hard turns. Full throttle. Constant repositioning. Each maneuver drained the last reserves from his tanks. His fuel gauge dipped into the red. 8 minutes of combat endurance remaining. The Germans sensed it. They began holding their attack lines longer. Braking later. Probing closer. An FW-190 feinted from the right. Howard committed. Two Bf-109s attacked from the left. He reversed hard, barely cutting them off. They were learning. Inside the bombers, pilots watched fuel gauges sink toward empty. They couldn't speed up without breaking formation. They couldn't break formation without losing their defensive firepower. Their survival now depended entirely on the lone Mustang circling above them. Howard checked his position. The formation was still 70 miles from the German border. At cruising speed, That meant nearly 20 minutes of flight remaining. He had less than 5. The mathematics were now undeniable. He would not make it home with power. Howard accepted that fact without hesitation. From that moment on, fuel calculations vanished. Escape planning disappeared. There was only one mission left: to remain with the bombers until the Mustang could no longer fly. 300 men depended on him, even with no ammunition, even with almost no fuel. The Germans launched another coordinated attack, 2 FW-190s from above, a Bf-109 from below. Howard turned toward the highest threat, forcing an early break. The others pressed in closer than before. Tracers arced toward a bomber's tail. Rounds struck aluminum. Sparks flashed. The Luftwaffe had drawn blood. Howard's fuel gauge slid lower. 3 minutes remaining. The bluff was fraying. The Germans were testing harder now, pressing closer, committing later. They knew something was wrong. They just didn't know what. Howard stayed. He always stayed. The fight entered its final phase not with gunfire, but with silence. Howard's fuel gauge slipped below 2 minutes. The Merlin engine still ran, but its tone had changed. No longer a steady roar, now a rough, uneven growl, pulling vapor from tanks that were effectively empty. Every hard turn risked starving the engine completely. Every climb bled speed he could not recover. Below him, 1B-17 had fallen behind. It was subtle at first, a slight sag in airspeed, a widening gap in the formation, but the Luftwaffe noticed instantly. A wounded animal never escaped predators for long. 3 FW-190s peeled away from their holding pattern and curved toward the straggler. Howard turned with them. He slid his Mustang into position between the attackers and the bomber, nose pointed straight at the lead Focke-Wulf. The German pilot held his line longer than before. Much longer. They closed head-on at a combined speed approaching 800 miles per hour. 6 seconds. 5. 4. At the last possible moment, the German broke away in duff. Howard had won another contest of nerve. But the engine coughed. Once. Twice. Fuel pressure flickered. The propeller slowed a fraction, then caught again. Howard nosed down instinctively, trading altitude for airflow, keeping the engine alive through momentum alone. The crippled B-17 dropped through 21,000 feet. 2 Bf-109s attacked together from opposite sides. Howard turned toward one, forcing it to brake, then reversed toward the second. That pilot broke away too, but they came closer than ever before. The Germans could hear it now. The Mustang's engine was no longer healthy. They pressed tighter, holding attack lines longer, closing distances they would never have risked earlier. The bluff was failing. Howard checked the gauges. 90 seconds of fuel remaining. The main bomber formation was 5 miles ahead, still moving west, still 45 miles from safety. The wounded bomber was now alone. 5 German fighters circled it. Howard placed himself directly between them and their prey. The first attacker dove. Howard turned toward him. The German broke away. The engine stumbled again. A second attacker came in from the opposite side. Howard reversed, his roll slower now, the Mustang heavy and sluggish without power to spare. That pilot broke off too, but barely. Altitude drained away, 18,000, 17,000, 16,000 feet. Then the engine quit. No bang, no fire, just silence. The propeller froze. Howard pushed the nose down to preserve airspeed. The Mustang became a glider, 7,000 pounds of aluminum slipping westward on gravity alone. One of the Messerschmitt pilots saw it instantly. He pressed in, closing to firing range on the bomber. Howard turned his powerless aircraft straight at him. The German hesitated, then broke away. Even as a glider, the Mustang was still a threat, at least for a few more moments. But the physics were relentless. Without power, Howard's turns widened. His reaction slowed. The Germans understood now. 4 Bf-109s formed for a final coordinated strike. Howard turned toward them, gliding, low energy, finished. And then, movement to the west. Tiny specks. Fast. Climbing. They resolved into P-47 Thunderbolts. 8 of them, scrambled from forward bases, full fuel, full ammunition. They were still minutes away, but they didn't need to arrive to change the fight. The Germans saw them too. The equation flipped instantly. The Messerschmitts broke formation, rolled away, and disappeared east into cloud and haze. Within seconds, the sky was empty. The 30-minute battle was over. The bombers were safe. Howard was not. He was gliding through 17,000 feet, descending fast, over hostile ground. The thunderbolts formed a protective ring around him, shepherding the powerless Mustang westward. Belgium lay ahead, but distance was cruel. His glide ratio said he would fall short. Howard tried the starter. Nothing. Then, on a final impulse, he switched tanks, pushed the boost pump to emergency, cracked the throttle, and hit the starter again. The engine coughed, caught, ran, roughly, for 3 seconds, then died. He tried again. This time, the Merlin ran for 5 seconds. Those seconds mattered. They slowed his descent. Bought altitude. Bought options. The Thunderbolt leader radioed him. Howard reported 0 fuel, gliding west. 2 P-47s peeled away to escort the damaged B-17. The rest stayed with Howard. Through 12,000, 10,000, 8,000 feet, he drifted. Ahead, he spotted a runway, short, narrow, a forward Allied strip in Belgium. He did the math. Altitude, 6,000 feet. Distance, 15 miles. Close. Very close. Howard trimmed for best glide, 175 miles per hour. At 3,000 feet, he lowered the landing gear. Drag increased sharply. He compensated, nudging the nose down. The runway filled his windscreen. 2 miles. 1. At 1,000 feet, he crossed the boundary fence. Perfect angle. No margin. He flared. The main wheels touched. Then the tail wheel. The Mustang rolled straight down the strip and stopped. James Howard had landed safely. Ground crews swarmed the aircraft. They found the tanks completely dry. 3 guns jammed solid. The 4th showed 175 unfired rounds, the weapon that had failed mid-fight. That afternoon, every B-17 from the formation made it home. The damaged bomber crash-landed in Belgium. The crew survived. 0 fatalities. 6 months later, Major James Howard stood at attention as he received the Medal of Honor, the only fighter pilot in the European theater to earn it during World War II. For 30 minutes, alone over Germany, he had defended 300 men with no ammunition, no fuel, and no way out. He stayed. That is what deserves to be remembered.